Now, as we move out of the Neolithic period, yet continue to focus on the ancient Near East, what observations can you make about this area comparing it to the same area today? It's still an area of great aggression and conflicts. Many of the dynasties and empires that we'll study in this unit controlled roughly the same region. Now, much of the art is going to focus on different themes now. The Stone Age art that we've just finished looking at focused on food and survival. Ancient Near East art will focus on religion in terms of their gods, war, this is especially seen in the architecture, kings, and laws. So religion, war, kings, and laws becomes the focus of ancient Near Eastern art. This is a war scene from the Standard of Ur, dates from around 2600 BC. It's wood inlaid with shell, limestone, and lapis lazuli. This is but 8 inches tall. Now, a major reason for war at this time, and perhaps still today, was envy over others' ways of life. Wonderful ironies exist in these ancient wars. Consider this: the weak were the ones that settled down as they were unsuccessful hunters. Nomads do not freely settle down, yet eventually strong nomads joined and conquered those who broke away. However, the strong conquerors ended up adopting the beliefs, religions, and languages of the weak. So who really did the conquering? The lapis in this particular war scene is incredibly beautiful. It's a beautiful blue stone that for many years was used to produce blue pigment in watercolor, and it's very highly valued today and is still used by at least one paint manufacturer. In Mesopotamia, we find the 4 pillars of civilization. These 4 pillars are the written word, the wheel, the concept of kings, and a society of laws. The wheel was invented in the 4th millennium BC, and the first wheeled vehicle was Sumeria. Now, parallels to Old Testament books are found in particular in the study of this area and period, with excavations often showing sand deposits wiping out previous levels of towns by a great flood. Now, the role of kings changed dramatically in Mesopotamia. The role of kings evolved from temporary elected positions to inherited lifelong charges. Early on, a king would be appointed only when an area was being challenged or there was the threat of war. Once the war was over, the king would step down. However, kings clearly got used to the power and enjoyed the power and sought to hand down that power to their sons. So the role of kings changes dramatically during this period. Another thing that's fascinating to study in Mesopotamia is the development of cuneiform writing. Here's a nice chart that shows you how the writing developed. The 2 images on the left are examples of cuneiform tablets that have been found with this writing on them. And you can see how initially on the left, in the left columns, these are essentially just pictures: the sun, the ox, the donkey, and so on. And as you go across the chart, you see how they evolved and became highly abstract, and this is how writing developed in this particular area. The word season, for instance, like a season of the year, is very interesting in terms of how it evolved. You look at it, and it seems essentially to be 2 pictures, and on the left you have wavy lines that might suggest the ocean or sea, and on the right you have a circle with rays coming out from it, the sun. You put the 2 together and you spell, in a sense, season. I like particularly how the ox or bull's head evolves from a very pictorial representation on the left, gets turned on its side, and then just becomes a series of dashes and lines and arrows. Now, formal religion may have begun with the Sumerians. In their culture, the transformation of gods and religion from magical powers to be harnessed to personifications of the forces of nature that contend with man take place. As kings became more powerful, they came to be referred as the god of one city-state, or God's representative on earth. What we're looking at here is the White Temple remains from Uruk or Warka. This is in Iraq, dates from 3500 to 3000 BC. Temples such as this were built to reflect the growing importance of gods. What's interesting is that these temples also served as the business centers of the city-states. So there is absolutely no separation of church and state at this point. This is a ziggurat of King Uramu from Ur, also in Iraq, dating from around 2100 BC. Now, these stepped pyramids were called ziggurats. For the most part, only the bases of these forms remain. And the following slide is a reconstruction of what a complete ziggurat and temple would have looked like. This is a reconstruction of the White Temple and ziggurat from Uruk. Now, what's characteristic of the wall or facades of these temples? This sort of undulating form. The design purpose for that was to break the monotony of these massive forms. We're going to look now at Sumerian sculpture. This is a female head from Uruk, 3500 to 3000 BC. She's marble and 8 inches tall. The Sumerian sculpture from Warka undergoes a radical change when compared to previous examples of sculpture that we've studied. Now, in what way or ways is this a new representation of a man or a woman? The important thing to consider here is that it is much more natural. Even when compared with the plaster skull from Jericho, it's far more sensitive. This is less a collection of symbols meant to stand for a man or a woman, and more a carefully studied representation of a visual stimuli. The shells that were used in the eyes of the Jericho skull, the plastered skull that we looked at, would have also been present in this female head from Warka. These are statues from the Abu Temple, dating from around 2700 BC. They are limestone, alabaster, and gypsum. The tallest figure here is 30 inches tall. Now, what's disproportionate in these sculptures? The big eye. These guys couldn't sleep if you gave them tons of medication. What else is common? The clasped hands. Often these figures were left in temples as surrogate prayers. At this point in history, man felt it was necessary to be in a constant state of prayer. This was perhaps, then, these sculptures, a hypocritical solution to an impractical problem. These figures are hierarchically sized. The largest figure represents the god Abu. This is the bull-headed lyre from the Royal Cemetery at Ur. It's gold leaf and lapis lazuli over a wooden core, approximately 5.5 feet tall. Now this is an absolute masterpiece of art, one of the greatest known images from ancient Near East. The way in which the blue here glows is still a fundamental and exciting way to use color. Now if you'll notice, under the tremendous lapis in this piece, you'll see several scenes that we're going to look at a detail of in the next slide. This is a detail from that lyre, and at the top of the scene we see the legendary king hero Gilgamesh, where he's wrestling two bulls. Gilgamesh was the most famous of the early kings. He won control of Sumer in a bloody civil war that so weakened Sumer that it was taken over by the Elamites. Now this is evidence of several common problems that led to these areas changing control so often. The chronology breaks down like this. First, the area would be weakened by war. Second, they would overextend their boundaries by war, conquer more than they could handle. And third, weak rulers would inherit lands from strong ones. This is kind of like the difference between the rich man and the poor man on the golf course. Or not the rich man, the poor man, the rich man and the rich man's son. The rich man picks up his tees, the son just walks off and leaves them there. Now back to Gilgamesh. Many great stories and epics were told about him, including him fighting his greatest rival, and this fight going on and on and on until they eventually decided they were friends rather than rivals, and they went off and terrorized everybody else. If you'd like to do some extra credit, you could do a research assignment on Gilgamesh and submit a paper to me via email. Here is a cylinder seal from Sumer and the impression that it left from around 2500 BC. It's marble. It's only 1 3/4 inches high, so it's very small compared to what you see on the screen. The importance here is that the individual emerges as being significant in Sumeria, and this is evidenced by the cylinder seals, which were found in great abundance. Now this is ram and tree, an offering stand from Ur from around 2600 BC. This is constructed of wood, gold, and lapis lazuli, about 20 inches tall. Now this ram from a Sumerian grave at Ur symbolized fertility. Its design leads us to believe that it was probably a supporter for a tray of incense that would have been used during religious rites. The animal's head, legs, and the trees were made of wood that was then overlaid with gold. His coat was of shell, and the horn and eyes of the lapis lazuli. Now the ram is an indication of the use of animals by these peoples in many of their ceremonies, and they pop up in jar handles and cauldrons as seen in the art of ancient Iran.